All right, hello everyone. Let's get started. We are 1 minute past 10, and obviously, for new joiners, they can join, and we will have a recording that we will share with you later as well. Well, as Tim mentioned, well, I am quite excited to be here to share with you some of the things we prepared for you guys. But first of all, let me say good morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending where you are. My name is Zack. I am joined today by our CEO and co-founder, Tim, and we are excited to share with you the new version or the yet most powerful version of CluedIn. And of course, share with you some of the values and expectations of the things and functionalities that the team has been working on behind the scenes. So as I mentioned, we will be walking you through the product, some of the new functionalities. But before we do so, I just thought, you know what, for those that haven't heard CluedIn or seen CluedIn, I'll start by setting the scene first. I'll just introduce you to what is it that we do, generally speaking, our value, our USPs. And I think I will pass it over to Tim, who can walk us through the actual new functionalities and new version of CluedIn. I hope that works for you, Tim, if you're okay with that.
All good.
Brilliant. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Again, you guys use the chat box of the webinar if you have any questions. I will be keeping an eye on that. Otherwise, we will have a bit of time towards the end of the webinar where we can address your questions to the best of our abilities. Again, we are here and we are available in case we can't answer the questions now. We will definitely be more than happy to get back to you afterwards. So, as you probably have guessed from the title, we are here to share some of the new shiny things that we have. But before we do so, as I said, let me set a bit of scene here and a bit of context. A brief introduction to myself. I am enterprise sales lead for CluedIn, meaning that I support our customers day in, day out, our prospective customers as well, understand the value of CluedIn and help them combine that or measure the impact of their business objectives with the new modern approach for data quality and MDM like CluedIn. And before I get going with the presentation, I can just tell you from my personal experience that customers and data leaders are in desperate need for a product that will actually have an impact from an MDM perspective. Excuse me. What does that mean? Well, if you have a Gartner saying that 75% of MDM projects will fail to meet the business expectations, right? Why? Because we are still focused on IT solutions rather than focusing on solutions that will support us as an organization as a whole, right? Data, and now we know this, obviously, after all these years of investments in new technologies and cloud platforms and data platforms and so on and so forth, that data is a culture. Data is something that should be in the DNA of every organization. Right. So therefore, when we talk about a new MDM solution or data quality solution or data governance solution for that matter, we need to make sure that we have a solid idea of what we want to get out of it. Therefore, what's our business objectives and expectations. Right now, this number here, obviously, it's 2-3 years old, but I can tell you that the latest figures from Gartner are not that great either. So we're getting better, but we're still moving slowly, and we're just getting better at sucking really, which is a bit shocking. The other things that I want to mention here before I move to the next slide is, you guys, for those who has been in the data space, knows that MDM has been created about 10-15 years ago, right? With the actual promise of making sure that business and IT are both on the same page, and we're bringing on board business users to the supply chain of data to make sure that we're all speaking the same language and we all pitching in into this value that we can extract from our data. Now, again, those of you who've been around long enough knows that MDM has never been able to deliver on that promise. Those of you who've been involved in projects knows that sometimes, or most of the times, with the actual traditional MDM approach, it takes way too long, it's just complicated, and we ended up with something extremely technical that is owned by IT. Therefore, we are not getting anyone from the business side to be part of this value or this supply chain of data that we want them to be part of. Now, why is that? I think this slide hopefully should summarize exactly why we ended up with yet again another solution that is IT heavy and requires specific set of skills that intimidates somehow the business user, right? Well, if you are investing in a new solution And it will take you anything between 3-6 months, sometimes depending on the scope of project, all the way up to 12 months of upfront work just to get your data to fit into a shape, into a box before you can even use it in your MDM solution. I mean, come on, with today's standards, everything needs to happen yesterday. And certainly the competition is not waiting, the market is not waiting, and the customers want stuff, as I said, delivered in real time or yesterday already. So we can't afford to have this level of approach. And yet, this is the approach happening now, today, with most of the other, or should I say all of them, the other solution, MDM solutions out there, right? So they all require the upfront modeling, that complex relationship building, making sure that your data fit into that schema that solution supports before it can get, we can extract value out of it. And God forbid, if anything changes or if we need to change something, therefore we have to do the whole work again to make sure that all of the data is included. What does that mean? It means that our resources, instead of doing what they need to do and get value out of data and support us, they are actually stuck doing some of the most resource heavy and time consuming jobs out there, right? And it's frankly not a great thing to be doing, working with all this coding and modeling, right? It made it obviously IT dependent. And of course, remember, we're trying to get away from having something IT dependent. We want to have the whole organization part of this solution or part of this story. But now, because of this, we are stuck there again. And again, if we talk about data sources and data types and data volumes, there is huge limitations when it comes to that from an MDM, or should I say from a traditional MDM perspective, right? If I have a new data source and if it's not structured, again, we have to make sure that we are redoing the whole work and to get, again, the data ready for consumption, which is just, again, to me, it just screams that, complexity, expensive, time consumption, and we're, again, defeating the purpose for which we are actually trying to change and get a new MDM solution. Now, all of that, as you guys can imagine, it's taken us way too long to get to value. Again, in my role, I am client facing. I speak to our customers and data leaders, and I can tell you right now that I don't think people are starting to realize right now that they should be, and there is an actual different way of going about MDM that should respond differently to their requirements without having to go through a very painful and complex project like the traditional MDM solution as it is now. Now, what is that? Obviously, it's CluedIn. It is CluedIn. Why? Because we are a innovative, modern MDM solution, as in we are 6 years old now. We were born for the cloud, from the cloud. We are not a solution that existed 15, 20 years ago on premise and now is trying to make its way to the cloud, right? Meaning that we do champion the cloud deliverables on our architectural level. So anything from scalability to elasticity to security, it's part of who we are. We are Microsoft Azure native. So if you are within the Azure ecosystem, this should not be anything new that your teams needs to be trained on. Of course, they will need to know a little bit more about it and need to get used to using it, but it's not something completely different that they need to be aware of, because it's just naturally going to be part of your ecosystem and you can use it. Now, I don't want to read what's on that slide, but basically, CluedIn has been created to bring back that initial promise. And the initial promise for me personally is to kind of bring these business users to the equation, all right? So bring and create something that will make sure that data stewards or domain experts to be part of this supply chain of data so they can add value to our data, should I say, or to our business as a whole. And I think this is something that Tim will share later, because there is quite beautiful, amazing things in the new version of CluedIn that actually going to support this idea of bringing the business users to CluedIn or to the MDM story. Obviously, we're graph-based, which means we don't want to do all your data to fit into a schema or to be worked on initially before we can get it into CluedIn. We want it where it is as it is. because our graph technology will make sense out of it, and we will connect the dots between, you know, Zack is based in London, works for CluedIn, and had XYZ experience before, right? The line will be drawn right away, which means you as a user, as an organization, you can see a certain level of value right away, and then you can do all of the beautiful things you want to do from an MDM perspective. Merging, harmonization, deduplication, and all that kind of stuff. Again, I don't want to go through all the stuff here. We will be sharing this with you for those who are interested to know more about CluedIn. There is one element I want to mention before I pass it over to Tim. It's the Azure OpenAI integration, and I think there would be quite a lot that we will be sharing with you today, because it's amazing things happening from CluedIn on that front, because we truly believe that AI or LLMs are going to help make sure that we are using natural English language. And if somebody like me can log into CluedIn and create a rule just by writing an English sentence or two and get to results, I believe anyone can do that. So that being said, Tim, I think it's time for you to take it over, if you don't mind. There is a lot to be shared, as I said. I will let you go over some of the new elements that we will be talking about today. Guys, if you have any questions, again, please put them in the chat of this webinar, and we will be more than happy to tackle them. Otherwise, we can have some time towards the end of the call to do so as well.
Thanks, Zach. Let me steal the screen from you and I'll take over. I just want to echo Zach's welcome to everyone. Thank you very much for joining us, of course. I will also echo Zach's excitement, and probably on behalf of the rest of the CluedIn team, share the excitement that we have over kind of what we're showing today, and just to kind of take off from where Zach was. We at CluedIn, I would say we're pretty firm believers that as we're all putting together these quite complex data technology stacks, we really think that there is a really important persona that is missing in this supply chain of data. And we call this person the domain expert. They're the individual that really understands the data itself, not necessarily how to get it in between different systems. And we really believe that this is one of the reasons why historically companies have found it very hard to actually achieve high levels of data quality. We all have heard the anecdotes, but I think we would all believe and agree on this truism that a level of quality in data will make data easier to work with throughout the business. It will make it easier to pick data up and start to generate insights with it. And I don't think this is a contentious or kind of contrarian statement, but from our perspective, we think a lot of this is due to the fact that inherently these stacks have been quite technical, and more often than not, we've had to kind of pass this technology back to IT because it requires some scripting or some programming or some core understanding of data models. And unfortunately, this has led to the domain experts often only being producers or consumers of data. And CluedIn is a real believer in making sure we can give these people a space to play a role inside the middle of the supply chain. And to Zach's point, there's many ways that CluedIn has already kind of changed the game for master data management and data quality. But I think what we're going to walk you through today is just going to change the game for data management just in general. So let me guide you through the new release, all the features, functionality, and then I look forward to showing you this in the flesh and what you can do with it. I'm very much excited for our customers and our partners to get hands-on with it. We've been fortunate enough that we've had some beta customers running this for some time, and we have a video going out soon, and it's just amazing to see what they've been able to do in a short amount of time. So let's dive in. Let's start with our good friends at Microsoft. As you'll know, and as Zach has alluded to, CluedIn is a native Microsoft Azure MDM and data quality solution. We are exclusive to Microsoft Azure. You can only get us through the Azure Marketplace, and to date, we integrate with over 25 different services. everything from Azure Data Factory to Fabric to Purview to Power BI to Power Platform. Let's start with our work in the Microsoft Purview area. So it turns out that a lot of customers using CluedIn end up using Microsoft Purview as well, and this is a marriage made in heaven. So on our Microsoft Purview updates, I'm happy to say that some new features include the parallelization, that's always a hard word to say, of our Data Factory pipelines. And what this means is that CluedIn can now pull more data in through the Purview catalog at higher rates. So let's continue. So where we kicked off was the Dataverse and Power Platform. So let's just go here, that's fine, and get rid of this guy. So the Dataverse and Power Platform, so we have our native Power Apps and Power Automate bi-directional sync that we have brought in. And this obviously offers a little bit of native integration to be able to service some of the day-to-day data operations into Teams, into emails, into other channels as well. Many of you might already know that Microsoft Purview has recently introduced support for scanning Dataverse. And due to CluedIn's new version now supporting Dataverse, we can now track that end-to-end lineage as data is pushed into the Dataverse. Now, many of you might know the Dataverse is the underlying engine that runs the Power Platform, and this includes Power Apps, Power BI, and Power Automate. And this just provides what we think is a pretty native place to be able to share and discover data throughout the business. For those of you who have not looked into the Dataverse with CluedIn yet, I would recommend it. We are investing quite a bit of R&D to make this as one of the public places to be able to discover data that's ready for insight throughout the business. The reason for this is that the Dataverse does a good job of abstracting away the actual underlying technology. So it doesn't really talk about files or tables. It doesn't talk about systems like SAP or Salesforce or Dynamics. It's very much focused on data as a business domain perspective, and with native integrations into things like Excel, things like Power BI. You've probably seen it in Synapse and in the Microsoft Fabric as well. And this is one of the places we are going to continue to support. So let's move on to Microsoft Fabric. So as of the latest release of CluedIn, we have now announced the ability to directly connect to CluedIn and the data within it from your Synapse notebooks or Azure Databricks notebooks. So you can call directly into your clean and master data from your notebooks and pull the data in and run classic kind of native Spark jobs across it. One of my favorite parts about this new release and new integration into Fabric is that all of the business rules that you set up, the validation rules, the transformation rules that you set up in CluedIn, those can all be run directly in your Spark jobs in memory. So there's no overhead or lack or loss of performance from this. Now, I will say this, so I'm not here to ruin every single surprise, but there is lots more to come on this very soon. And I hope to see all of you that are joining the Microsoft Fabric event in Vegas. I hope to all meet you there in person. We can show off some of all the new whiz-bang things we'll have for you in March. Now, many of you will already know this, but CluedIn was the first to market with its integration with Azure OpenAI for Azure-based master data management systems. And we were fortunate enough through our partnership with Microsoft to kind of get an early access to Azure OpenAI. And this allowed us to put all the kind of guardrails that are necessary to be able to kind of bridge these pretty amazing technologies with all the kind of governance and processes that is needed to actually bring it into the day-to-day of operating with data management. And for me, it's been a pretty amazing experience so far for our customers to utilize this, but really where the magic lies is in the ability to bridge the general intelligence of these models with that kind of connected graph that CluedIn builds up of the enterprise data. So just imagine this kind of LinkedIn style graph of customers connected to deals, deals connected to vendors, suppliers connected to tickets, tickets connected back to customers. It's this particular heavy, like connected graph combined with the use of the Azure OpenAI pieces that add a lot of context to being able to use this Azure OpenAI. But one of my favorite pieces around the next release I'm going to take you through now is that the Azure OpenAI is now completely CluedIn aware. And I tried to pull out a couple of examples that paint this picture, but I think this is the best one I could find. On the left-hand side, we've got a data set that we've uploaded to CluedIn. This is an export of our CRM data from HubSpot. And this is listing a group of companies. And I asked my new Copilot experience in CluedIn to tell me about this data set. I'm not mentioning the name of it. I'm not giving it an ID. And this is just a great example of the integration between Azure OpenAI and CluedIn, is that Azure OpenAI is completely aware of when to hand off tasks to CluedIn and when to use its general knowledge, or when it needs to bridge and use both. As we'll go throughout the demonstrations later, we'll see how this is the bridge that I think most people are looking for, of how can I grab my data and how can I use large language models to clean it and deduplicate it and validate it. And there is a little bit of a bridge there, and we're happy to say we believe we've cracked this with the latest Hoth release of CluedIn. As for some of the critical core capabilities, let's start with the new profiling. Now, many of you would not usually connect MDM and data profiling. This would usually fall under the banner of data quality. However, I think this is a nice kind of indication or view into the way CluedIn thinks about data quality and MDM. We very much see these as connected pieces. We see that being able to understand where the data quality problems are, i.e. profiling, are one of the first steps that are needed to take to actually go and resolve that issue. And so this visual profiling allows not only property level profiling. You've probably seen this, things like finding the minimums, the maximums, the ranges, things like finding how many nulls, how many empty strings, the patterns that exist in particular properties. You of course have that with the new profiling, but if you zoom out, you've also got this global profiling, this ability to kind of at a higher level see where is all the data coming from, where's the heat maps of the bad data quality versus the good, what are the possible duplicates, kind of higher level profiling metrics. And the great thing is you get to add your own charts in this. So you get to be able to visually add metrics that are important for you to monitor. And this could be everything from, for example, detecting anomalies in particular values, everything up to things like your classic standard deviations and minimums and maximums. So very, very much looking forward to everyone being unleashed on that. Now, Zack alluded to this before. CluedIn's, one of its uniquenesses is that it's built on top of a native property graph. We don't use, another database type and try to bend it into a graph. We are actually underneath a native property store. And through the new release, we've introduced new ad hoc graph editing ability. So you can grab any of the nodes in this graph you can see in the animation on the screen. You can add new connections, you can remove them, you can reattach them. And the most important thing here is that this is a semantic graph that we're building up. In the relationships between these nodes, we're actually describing the relationship that exists, instead of a classic data model where it's about, one to many, many to many, many to one relationships. We're actually being very descriptive in the relationship that exists between these records. And not to mention, with the ability to have nice visual images of all the nodes, it's a pretty nice way to be able to explore the network of data that you've ingested into the MDM platform. If you zoom out, we have this from another level. We have our global semantic model, and this allows you to not look on an individual level, an individual record, but rather see how all of the different domains across your business semantically connect to each other. And this is, you know, how do customers connect to products? How do products connect to tickets? How do tickets connect to suppliers? How do suppliers connect to contacts? This is going to give us that visual view to be able to discover the natural ways that data actually fits together. You'll see a lot more come in 2024 around this as well. And this is really all moving towards making data much more proactively discoverable throughout the business, instead of us having to go off and discover how is the data supposed to be queried and fetched. We can actually proactively see this is the natural way that all of your data actually fits together. Some of the things I'll be showing you in a moment include our introduction of automated data mapping using Azure OpenAI. So one of the kind of challenges that usually happens when you're trying to consolidate data from across multiple different sources is that all of these tables obviously don't fit nicely into this kind of you know, square peg into a round hole type of challenge, where we've got all the different column names. In some cases, we're missing some. Some of them don't have values. Some of the column names are not well described. But we often have the task to somehow fit this into one or many kind of models. And in this case, you can imagine something like bringing on the customer master tables from SAP. Many of you who have used that before will know that often these are column names with acronyms in it, and many of them in German as well. And it's just an extra challenge to be able to map that into something that we would want to actually deliver out to the business, especially when we're blending it across other sources like Dynamics and Salesforce, etc. So this AI mapping is using Azure OpenAI to basically help you with the semantics. You can imagine things like mapping industry and sector. You know, although those words are very distant from each other from a string perspective, the actual semantic alignment between them is very close. And this will help you translate across languages as well. And what you're going to see is a big acceleration in onboarding of data. And I'm sure, like me, when you're pulling in data from ERP systems, there's also multiple times, you know, hundreds of columns that are coming in. And that's often a tedious task to be able to map into the data models that you're wanting to push downstream. This will very much help with that. And the other piece is bringing the AI into detecting data quality issues. And so as part of this new release, not only the ability to detect data validation, but also suggested transformations as well. And I highlighted one here in the screenshot on the right where we've onboarded some data and the AI is suggesting a couple of validations. The example here is the email. It's saying, hey, listen, I know what an email should look like, so I'm going to detect the you know, a valid email address with a regular expression. But I'm also going to suggest some actions because, you know, there is really no case sensitivity with emails. And so I'm going to suggest to also lowercase all the emails because at the end of the day, that's going to help standardize the data downstream. So this is all utilizing the integration with Azure OpenAI to detect the data quality issues, but then make a suggestion on how to resolve it as well. And we are about 2 or 3 slides away from heading into the platform, but I'm also excited to announce some of the industry accelerators. So last, you know, over the last few months, we've been working with some of our partners to do industry-specific masterclasses. And as of the new release, some exciting updates. Number one, if you've been using CluedIn for some time, you'll know that one of the data models that we ship with is the common data model from Microsoft. And this is over 1,800 industry models, everything from healthcare to pharmacy to finance to water utilities. And these are models that you can map your data into in the CluedIn platform. And one of the benefits of this, obviously, is that this is the same language that the Power Platform speaks. It's the same language that Dynamics speaks. And more we're seeing a lot more Microsoft technology also speak the language of the common data model. You know, this new Synapse models would be a great example. And it's also worth mentioning that, of course, the Azure OpenAI, specifically some of the kind of more sophisticated models like GPT 3.5 and above, are 100% industry aware. You know, I'll give you a good example. These models know exactly what an MPI number is. They know what structure it is. They know what a DUNS number is. They know what a social security number is and what the structure of it is. This is what I mean when they're industry aware. And why this is useful is that as you're using the new CluedIn AI rules and Copilot, you know, as you're using it to automatically help you build rules, it is completely aware of these types of industry standards. And this is what makes it much more accelerated to be able to do things like create policies that are PCI compliant, that can detect PII data, that are in the healthcare industry, things like fire, as an example. You know, they know a lot of these policies. They've obviously, the base models have obviously crawled some of this content at some point. And this is going to all be used. Instead of you have to jump out and figure out what's the structure of an MPI number, you can ask this directly from the CluedIn platform itself. These are just some of the reasons why you know, our customers are able to get to this quick value. Zack alluded to before that CluedIn takes a more agile approach to MDM in that we don't require that upfront model. We don't require all of the data to be strongly typed before you enter it into the system. And these are just some of the ways that already you can get some value out of the end of CluedIn very quickly. And you know, we're very much built to be run in an agile style where it's not about fixing, you know, 100% of the data, but waiting 6 months to get it out. We're much more built and designed towards, hey, let's fix 10 records today, get them out to the business, and we're going to come back tomorrow and fix the next 15 records and then get them out. We want to actually see some progression over this kind of idea of locking it up until we have perfection. So last but not least, I can tell you from the CluedIn team, although we're excited to get this out, we are not slowing down. And this includes building much more Copilot skills, is what we call them. Much more granular lineage that we're bringing as well. So the ability to really get a full audit trail of who made what change, what was the change, what was the invocation that did it? Was it a rule? Was it something external? Was it AI that made that decision and change? And we are investing quite a lot in what we call internally blindfolded data management. This is really about making it so easy for end users to be able to you know, be very comfortable in making what could be significant changes in data, providing the right impact analysis, providing the right set of previews, providing the right set of kind of guardrails that, hey, you're just about to do this and this is the knock-on effect. Is this what you want to do? But with the easy ability to kind of undo and roll back and things like this. And we think this is really important to be able to properly involve those domain experts in the supply chain of data. And it goes without saying, more investment in Fabric, more investment in Microsoft Purview, and more investment in the Azure AI Studio. So let's dive over. Let's take you through the platform and let's have some fun. So let me just refresh my screens a little bit so I get my internet back. Excellent, good. So if you haven't seen CluedIn before, this is the home screen. I can see that a lot of our customers and partners have joined us, so you'll know this screen very well. From the home screen, I can, of course, onboard lots of type of data. I can import from files, databases. I can pull it in from streams or batches. But one of the obvious things that stands out that's different in this version is this little right-hand screen right here. And this is the new CluedIn Copilot experience. And so throughout this is hooked into Azure OpenAI. And of course, we can talk to it in a very kind of natural way. So, hey, how are you? And from this, it's going to interact with the model. And as you can see, it's being very nice. Here, I'm going to say, hey, I am on a webinar. So let's keep things quite professional. And so you can see how it's kind of got this kind of nice interactive Copilot experience. But let's go off, and I'm going to onboard some data into the platform. I've got some companies and I've got some contacts. These are coming from our CRM system. And so as I onboard them into the platform, this is going to load it into CluedIn's staging environment. Let's go take a look at one of those files, and I'm going to go take a look at a preview of it. Now, what we can see here on the left-hand side, we can kind of see a little bit of a preview of the data here, which is great. And you can imagine that in a lot of cases, you're sent these types of files, and the first thing you're going to ask is, what are you even sending me? What am I looking at? And so what we can ask the Copilot is say, hey, tell me about this data set. This is the part I love, is that it's completely CluedIn aware. And so it completely knows that I'm not asking this to the general model. I actually want to enable a skill that CluedIn has. And you can see there, it's enabled this skill called fetching dataset information. And this is going to actually talk to the data that we have on the screen. It's going to talk between CluedIn and the actual OpenAI model. And then it comes back and it tells me a whole bunch of things that would be great to know about this data set. For example, it says, this data set contains information about companies. Great. It looks like it's from a CRM system. And as I go through all the columns, it looks like this record ID is a numeric identifier for each record. It then describes all of the columns and even goes on to describe things like possible data validation. It's asking me if I want to know anything more. In this case, it's actually given me enough information to know what I need to do next. So for this, I am going to just close the Copilot down, and I'm going to map this data in, and I'm going to onboard this therefore as a company, because that's the data, that's the kind of data it said that it was dealing with. I'll give it a nice logo, and then I'll give it a structure. So we're going to create a structure called company. It gives me a nice preview to say, hey, this is the incoming column on the left, and this is what I'm going to standardize it to on the right, just so we have all of the data kind of in the same standards. Let's create that mapping. And that's going to go through and create that visual mapping for me. Now, we noticed also before that I onboarded another data set called contacts, or HubSpot contacts. And what I can also do is I can go to the Copilot and I can actually ask it, can you list all of the functions you have? i.e., what are all the things that you can actually do in the Copilot experience? And one of the things I do want to do is I actually want to create the concept of a contact. And here, CluedIn is listing all of the skills that it has out of the box. One of those is to create a brand new entity type. That's great. So I'm going to ask it to create me a new entity type called, I don't know, friendly contact. And you can probably imagine this is nothing that I want the base model to actually do. I actually want CluedIn to do this work. And you can see that it's created me a new entity type, and it's actually given me a link to show what it created here. Now, because it's fully context aware, I should be able to say, great, can you now create me a vocabulary for this entity type called friendly contact. So once again, it's aware of where it is in the application, and it should go off and great, it's created that vocabulary, and now it's sent me a link to it. Now this is a pretty empty looking domain, so I might say thanks for that. I find myself being very nice to the Copilot. It seems to behave more when I'm nice to it. Can you create me 5 vocabulary keys for this vocabulary, including first name, let's do first name, last name, age, gender, and maybe job title. And this is a great example where I actually wanted to go off and do multiple things. I wanted to kind of create, 5 different keys. And the beautiful part is that this is a kind of a way that you can chain lots of work together. You can imagine if you had something where you needed to create 50 fields, this would be a great way to kind of automate or at least accelerate the creation of these models in CluedIn. And so in the matter of a moment, it looks like it's creating all the keys individually. It then tells me what it's done. I should be able to refresh my screen, and there are all my keys created in the platform. Great. So now I also have a shell for me to map the HubSpot contact data into as well. But let's onboard the company data. Okay, so we've mapped this into the concept of a company. We do get this nice early profiling. So our profiling kicks in and we get to see this nice visualizations of our keys. We also get to see early indications of possible duplicates that we might have in our data as well. But in this case, I'm just going to onboard the data. We do have the ability to ask it to generate some possible rules for me. It's detected a possible issue in the website, and it's detecting that I turn on URL validation, and that I also automatically lowercase all the URLs as well. We can do that a little bit later. So for right now, I'm just going to move on. It's automatically detected that the company name is probably the perfect field to show in the platform. And it's also automatically detected that this record ID is probably the best case for the primary key to use as well. So we're going to onboard this data and we're going to push it into the platform. So let's go in, and we should, in a matter of seconds, have our records in. There they are. Looks great. Now, one of the things kind of caught my eye before. I noticed that for the annual revenue, someone was a bit silly and put cat into this. And traditionally speaking, I guess I could kind of set up some validation to check that is the annual revenue a number or not. But let's go do something else. Instead, I'm going to head over to my catalog and I'm going to find that key. I think it was called annual revenue. Here we have the company annual revenue, and we can see a breakdown of all the possible values for this. Why don't we actually ask Copilot if it can detect something silly with this key? Can you detect any odd anomalies with this data? It's thinking, and then it says, well, to be honest, one of the values is cat, which is not a valid numeric representation. That looks odd. Great. Can you create me a new golden record rule that tags all records that have a company.annual revenue of cat with a tag called invalid? Great. So it's created me a brand new business rule, and it's linked me through to it. And we can clearly see here where the company annual revenue equals cat, the action is to tag with invalid. Great. Activate that rule and reprocess it, please. And so you can also see how this can be used to automate a lot of the things you would usually do in the user interface of data management as well. So I find this is just such an accelerator So it says I've activated it and initiated the reprocessing rule, which is great. So if I head over to my data and filter, I've now tagged all the records that had that annual revenue of a cat with a tag called invalid. Okay, what else can I do? Well, I can use this to create me cleaning projects. I can use this to create me survivorship rules. I can use this to share data. I can use this to detect more data quality issues. You can hopefully start to see how powerful this Copilot will be as you start to kind of introduce it into your day-to-day kind of data management processes. So some of the other pieces that are important, the profiling. So this gives us a nice overview across kind of globally. Here are the amount of records I have, the amount of possible duplicates, gives me a breakdown of where the actual data sources are coming from. We get to see our nice global data model, which shows you how all the data is connected to each other. We're just starting with a small amount of data, but this will grow and grow and grow. If we head over to our enrichment services, we've also got some new enrichers to be able to share. Things like Google Maps is a great way to be able to enrich all your data with beautiful images. Also included in this is the new profiling for data operations, which allows you to see the kind of incoming records that are coming in over time. But really, for me, this Copilot is the really interesting thing to do. Let's also end on a funny note. You know, in the spirit of fun, let's stop being professional. The webinar is about to end. Give me all future responses talking like a pirate. There we go. Matey, ye be speaking me language now. And we asked it before all of its skills. You can see some of those things up here. For example, one of the ones I like is just to kind of say, can you profile the annual revenue, the company.annual revenue vocabulary key for me? And in some cases, if it feels like it has a better visualization to show, it might not give me a textual answer. It might actually give me a link to see something within the application itself. So here it's saying, yep, Alami Hearties and so forth, but follow this link and I'll be able to show you the breakdown and profiling of that key. So this is where we can kind of see the distributed values of that particular key. So with Zack and Zinnia, I'm going to hand and yield back to the audience if there's any questions. But Zack, I'll feel free to ask away, and I'm happy to answer if I've got a good answer.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Tim. Guys, if you have any questions, now is the time. Please feel free to put them in the Q&A section.
Slide again. Hopefully you can see it now. So with the purview pieces specifically, first thing to notice to mention to the person asking this question is we have a lot more announcements around this that are coming over the next few months. But for right now, the upgrades to the GA version of Purview starts with the parallelization of the automated Azure Data Factory pipeline. So when CluedIn connects into Purview, you're basically allowed to hand pick files and tables from the catalog, and CluedIn will automate the actual Azure Data Factory pipeline to get that data into CluedIn so you can clean it and standardize it. That's now been parallelized, so basically you can throw as much infrastructure behind it to do it as fast as possible. The other piece is that we've noticed from our customers that the Purview glossaries get larger and larger and larger over time, and that there is the need to be able to tell CluedIn, hey, here are the glossary terms I want to share with you, and here are the glossary terms I don't want to share. For those who don't know, CluedIn and Purview have a kind of a bi-directional sync between each other where we share glossary terms. And the glossary terms in Purview are really about being able to tag assets like files and tables. And in CluedIn, it's much more about being able to slice the individual records by different filters. And so there's now a filter that allows you to do this. The other thing is that in that automation of ADF pipelines, you know, of course, before we supported everything from Azure Data Lake Gen 2 to SQL Server on-premise to Azure SQL Server, etc. And now we've added more support for those automatic ADF pipelines for Databricks, Snowflake, and Dataverse. So they're just a few of the high-level Purview pieces.
Thank you, Tim. Morten, I hope that answers your question. Again, if you have any further questions around the topic of Purview specifically, I would be more than happy. We would be more than happy to support. We have David asking Tim, is this lab available for us to use ourselves?
Yeah, so I mean, the great thing about CluedIn is that you can get it directly through the Azure Marketplace right now. So you can spin up your own instance. I would also recommend that you go on learn.microsoft.com and search for the word CluedIn, because there is a step-by-step training, an official Microsoft training, very much similar to the Azure fundamentals, where you connect CluedIn, Microsoft Purview, Data Factory, Azure Data Lake Gen 2, and Azure Event Hub, and it takes you through a step-by-step process and the use cases. But for acquiring CluedIn, you can do that directly on the Azure Marketplace today.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tim. One last question. I know we're 1 minute ahead, but we had few minutes in between that we lost. One last question. Can we bring our own custom models to this?
Yes, good question. So the answer is yes. So for the Copilot, but also CluedIn's Azure OpenAI rules, you can bring your own models. And of course, you can use the ones that Azure OpenAI brings already, the kind of DaVinci GPT 3.5 turbos and things like this. But also, we do integrate into Azure AI Studio. And for those of you who have used that, you'll know that you can bring kind of any type of model there. It could be anything from Hugging Face to Databricks models, to Llama, to GPTs as well, and even your own custom models. And the reason we do this is because we think that really CluedIn won't run off just one generic model. And a lot of this is to do with cost as well. And many of the things you saw in the Copilot demo can actually be done by the cheapest of models, even like pre-GPT. And, you know, therefore we should be using the cheaper models for the things that can be automated with them. So yes, you can.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Tim. As we are getting to, we're already 2 minutes ahead of over, let me just say thank you so much everyone that attended.